It is a pleasure to welcome you to today's ISM New Jersey webinar. In the session today, I will facilitate a conversation with Donna and Chris Donato, and we will look to unpack what procurement and sales professionals can learn from one another to make each other better at their jobs. So we're looking forward to a dynamic and engaging discussion. So we invite you to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to address them as we go along. So just a quick snippet of who I am. I am a senior manager in global procurement project management, and I have held various finance or procurement and project and program management roles over the last 15 years at large pharma companies, such as GSK, Pfizer, Teva, and J&J. And I have also been involved with the ISM New Jersey for many years, and some of you may be aware that I previously led the Women in Leadership Conference. So welcome, and looking forward to having some fun today, and also learning and having a really, really dynamic discussion, as I mentioned. And also welcome, Donna and Chris. Thank you so much for your time and the expertise that you'll share today. I think everyone is excited about the session. And so we heard a little bit about me. So how about I start and begin to introduce you both to the audience. So starting with you, Donna. So Donna, you are the America CEO of Chain IQ, a procurement services company. And prior to this, you were the head of strategic sourcing at Amex. And you've had similar roles at other companies such as BMS and Pfizer. And as it relates to ISM New Jersey, you've been a great supporter over the years as you've spoken at the Women in Leadership Conference. And also, very notable, you are a previous Crystal Awards winner. So we're excited to have you and re-acknowledge that recognition. But let's jump in here. As it relates to your current role, it's interesting that you have made the transition from an internal operating role to an external business role. And that is an interesting journey that our audience of procurement leaders might be interested in. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, so good to see you, Alicia, again, and reconnect with you after our Pfizer days, I think, right?
Yes.
And working through some, complicated transactions. So and it sounds like you've cornered the market on pharma, with your experience.
Yeah, thank you.
So it's an interesting transition. As you mentioned, I've been in procurement roles for a long time now, in pharma as well as financial services, and I really do love what I do. It's been, I feel like, in my blood, and I'll tell you more a little bit about kind of that story. But over the years, procurement, I really believe I've honed kind of my belief that procurement is about connecting things that otherwise be disconnected, right? And we play such a critical role in the ecosystem of, suppliers, third-party relationships. And at times I, was pulled into some of the business development work and actually was asked to go to the other side of the table and help teams, to look at different perspective, how a company might position itself to a procurement department, and kind of coach from that perspective. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to be in a commercial role, and kind of with all of the experience that I've built over 20 plus years. And I tried it a couple of times, in the pharma space, but also, explored and was tapped for, potential role in at Amex. There was a department called Strategic Partnerships that looked at relationships across, kind of 300 degrees, right? As our customers, as our suppliers, as our alliance, partners. And, but ironically, it's actually when I was leaving Amex, I was in transition, out of my last role, that I was talking to a recruiter about like what's happening in the market. And, we talked through a couple of roles. And then I said, so what else is new? What's exciting that you're working on? And he mentioned, he's like, well, there's this Swiss-based company that's really innovative and focuses on being the best in indirect procurement space. And they're looking for a regional CEO. I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, put me in.
Powerful.
I was like, this is like the culmination. Like, why didn't you like mention before? But sometimes, it's not until you put yourself out there that
Right.
things become more obvious. And in that conversation, he said, "Well, I have to put together a slate of candidates tonight."
You're the last one at it.
I was the last one in. Yeah, LIFO. No, last. But I was so excited about it, and the more I researched what the company was about, the mission, the passion behind it, the people, the clients we serve, and the potential to grow to, and basically to do what I love to do at scale was just amazing. So, but it was through those conversations, that said, please consider, here's my thinking, here's how I would go to market, here's what I would bring to, to the space.
No, that's great. That's great.
Say it.
Powerful.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's powerful, and it also shows some of the transferable skills and experiences that we have from procurement that we can apply to other businesses. And so, when you think about this transition, what has been the hardest part about making this transition?
You make a good point about transferable skills, right? In terms of you know what, the one thing when I thought about what it is, and it is that relationship building, right? In procurement, we always try to get a seat at the table, and I worked really hard, to build relationships at the company with, CIOs, CFOs, CMOs at the highest level, so we could showcase the value. And that's selling, and selling is hard. So
Yeah.
I do want to say, in terms of when I think different kind of mindset and the different hat that I'm wearing now, kind of that commercial skills, it's not easy. I love it. And there is definitely great foundation, both for me as a practitioner, but also when I translate of what I did in the in-house, so to speak, in relationship building, it does translate to the sales, expertise that are required. Of course, I also have my coach here, because sales is his life, so that helps. And then on a practical level, I started this job during Corona situation. So I haven't really met anybody yet, face to face. So you really appreciate the value of the relationships and how you have to rethink, the way you build the new ones, especially from scratch. It's, we have great people and we're a global company. It just takes more effort, more deliberate, intentional, actions to actually not just do a town hall, but build more of a one-on-one or smaller group connections to really learn and bring the best out in people. So.
No, that's great. That's great. Now, since we do have our procurement professionals here, we think about your experiences to date. I know it's relatively recent, but do you think you would go back?
I never left. That's how I think about it. I feel.
Tell me more.
Well, now at Chain IQ, we get to serve multiple clients, and just our ability to bring, that insight, the speed to decision, the confidence in the decision on behalf of our client. It's all still there, right? It's just, I feel we have better tools, better capability, and to do that. So I feel like I'm still living and breathing, procurement. I love it. I want to see profession be successful, so much, because I believe, in what, and I've worked in fantastic companies, to see what also good could look like, and having the collection of those experiences, I think now powered by Chain IQ it's just amazing. So I never left.
Oh, that's good. That's wonderful, because you've been such a great role model and inspiration to so many of us. So happy you're still here with us. Now, just a quick one before we move over into to Chris. Just wanted to quickly take a step back and see if you can share a little bit more about your personal journey, where you grew up, and how you got to where you are today.
Are you picking on my accent? Is that what it is? I do notice if I talk fast, it comes out occasionally. So I'll give you a sign to slow down. But thanks for asking. I grew up in Soviet Union in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And it was the time of scarcity of resources. So procurement was a sport. You know, you had to know supply chain for toilet paper, for like the basics, bread, you had to plan in advance how long you're going to stand in line. Sometimes I'd bring like my homework to do just to stand in line to get sugar and bread. Or sometimes I'd see a line, of people like cute, like lined up around the block. You don't even know what it was for, but you just get in, you're like, what are they giving? They're like, we don't know. And then you get to the end and the product probably already changed, but I remember buying shoes that weren't even my size, but I was like, that's okay. I can barter them for something else. So I feel like I stepped into procurement without even realizing what was the kind of the professional, terminology associated with the profession. But I loved it, right? Like combination of scarcity of resources gives you an opportunity to get creative.
Nice. Well, look at that coming full circle. Great. Well, listen, at this point, how about we bring Chris into this? So Chris, you recently started your own company, Esellas, after many years in large companies like HP and Accenture. So how did that come about?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And again, I'll echo Donna's comments. Thanks for having us on. Thank ISM. Donna and I banter about sales and procurement all the time, and we're glad someone else cares about it. So you're glad you asked us to do this. My background is all sales and marketing in some form or fashion. I worked for some fast-growing companies and some pretty large enterprises. I was working at Accenture, and I just saw the dynamic changing between the buyer and the seller. And there's lots, this was about 6-7 years ago. You could just see it. And what was happening is there was this gap growing between us as a seller. Buyers were getting further along without us. They had more information. And I just saw that sales needed to evolve, and it wasn't evolving fast enough. I was running sales for first at Accenture, then I went back to HP, running a large organization, and decided, you know what, I did some entrepreneurial stints inside these companies, and decided I'm going to start on my own. So we are helping other companies build high-performing revenue organizations, and then make this shift to something very different that works more effectively in this sort of new, buying paradigm. And then all of a sudden it went digital. So it's created another challenge for a lot of companies. And so we're helping companies, get their products and services to market and make this transition. So that's what we're doing.
No, that's great. That's great to hear. And kind of being along this entrepreneurial route, I'm sure we probably have a few in the audience who've had similar dreams of starting their own company. Do you have any advice for them?
I do. I dreamt about it for a while. I started my career before I knew any better. I as an entrepreneur, and then I went into large corporate, learned a ton, and I had dreamt I'm going to do this again one day. And it took me a while. I wrote the business plan for the company I'm operating now when I was at Accenture 6 years ago. And it took a while to launch it, but I'd say number one, know why you're doing it. I think that we do dream about some of the autonomy, the control, it's the ownership, but it isn't without significant challenges. So be really clear about your why. Know what, and the kind of business. So lifestyle business or a business that you're going to bring in others and scale. Be really clear about that. I can't say enough about my wife and just having support. It is a tough journey, anyone who's done it. And I'll tell you, I was talking to another entrepreneur. I said, do you ever think about quitting? And he said, yeah, only when I fall on my face. I said, well, how often does that happen? He said, every day. And that's how it feels. There are lots of written about it. So you need support. So if you're going to try it, make sure you have that support structure. And then lastly, I'd say, which is kind of part and parcel to my background, is go get a client. If you have an idea, you have this ambition, you're not a business until you get a customer. Go get a customer. That's the rule number one. But yeah, so hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's definitely helpful information and things that we should consider. So thanks both for your backgrounds. that you've shared with us. And so want to progress the conversation, but also address the obvious. So you're husband and wife, business owners, buyer and seller, so how does all of that work? With us.
It's been a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Look, we are opposites, and in a lot of ways, and just by the virtue of our background, our profession. But there's so much also in common, right? You got the common kind of vision for, the life and support of the careers that we both want to have. But I think the real nugget, for us, and became so obvious, is just learning from each other. That was so,
Yeah.
came out maybe out of frustration sometimes, and some of the dinner conversations, will be thinking like, how do I solve this? This doesn't make sense, and Chris will be, well, hold on. Let's take a look at it from my perspective, or the seller perspective, again, both on personal and professional. And those opposite points of view, once we really unpack them, have been tremendously helpful, and it helps with everything. Helps with, the three, I was going to say not so young teenagers, and the dogs, how to be pet parents and real parents, and how to, integrate our thinking into work. I think comes a lot from learning from each other. So I think over the years, we definitely became much better listeners, to the different perspectives, and listen to seek understanding, not just to kind of impose a point of view. So I would say, I don't know, Chris, if you want to add anything while I'm listening. So
our strength is in the fact that we're opposites. It really does. Like, we just are so different in so many ways. I'm the dreamer, she's the doer. I'm the spender, she's the saver. I mean, we just happen to make it work. And the fact that we're buyer and seller, and we've done this, it's an interesting dynamic, but like anything, it's not without a lot of, we work through a lot. So it's good. Thank you for
that's great. No, sure. And along those lines, I mean, we'll stay here a little bit and do it as a kind of metaphor. But in this tortured world of buyers and sellers, and this tug of war between all parties, so amongst you, who does the shopping?
Wait.
I do. I do the shopping, and
it's a team sport. Mm-hmm.
Donna the buying. And there's a difference. Like, I'm always dreaming things up. We should do this. It is a sales sort of, muscle. Thinking through, what could be the desires, and then it's always like she goes into, okay, get out of the way. Let me compare everything. Let me make sure you get the best deal.
Well, look, as I mentioned, I grew up in Soviet Union days, so scarcity of resources, I think, gets kind of implanted in you, and naturally went into the procurement of profession. But I love the ideas, but I'm always thinking, like, what's the risk? Did you think through the best option? He jokes with me that I have to RFP every personal purchase.
Yep.
He's cheap, Alicia. That's what.
You're taking it far there.
Frugal. We could really, kind of settle on that. So I've been on my own for a long time, since the young teenage days. So you learn a couple of hacks along the way.
Right. And in this, has Chris convinced you to buy things that you don't need? So thinking about the influence.
This is actually a really good question, because there was an article that, of course, you wrote a while back, and it basically, said, this expression that sales people have, almost as bragging rights, saying, I can sell ice to an Eskimo, which really implies you're selling something that somebody doesn't need. And your point was, really don't do that. That's actually a bad, kind of claim to fame, so to speak, for a sales profession. So he didn't convince me that we, of something we don't need, but he did convince me that we have a lot of needs. So that's
well done.
Yes. I was like, I didn't realize we need that, but I could see that now. So that's a skill.
Well done. I'll need to apply that. No, but this has been great. This has been fun. And I think like we told all at the beginning, we want to have some fun. We want it to be dynamic and engaging. So how about now let's get into the headline here, and we can start with you, Donna, again. So you have this view that procurement can learn from sales so they can be better at their job. So do you want to explain that just a little further?
Yeah, and I think it builds, I think, on what we just talked about, right? Like any partnership consists of, several parties, right? You're part of a transaction. So when I think about the buy-in process, procurement process, sales is one half of that equation for sure, right? So I definitely learned a lot along the way. So a couple of things come to mind. We often, in the profession, protect, our business partners, our enterprise almost from sales and act almost as a gatekeeper, for salespeople to enter into, our enterprise, control the badge access, even, the flow of information. And what I noticed early on that, okay, well, while procurement is doing that, and I think there's sometimes good reason for, structure and, being, able to control some processes. I noticed sales, professionals were walking the halls and having conversations with the business partners that I've had a hard time getting on the calendar with. So, and actually, I'm ironic with this, how I met Chris, and he was having all kinds of conversations with the CFO, CIO, and I get a note from the CFO saying, hey, you need to meet this Chris Donato. I was like, why is he even meeting you? Great, it was like years ago, in the earlier kind of career days. But what I observed is that the sales profession, we want to, as procurement professionals want to have a seat at the table with the business partners, but the sales professionals are the ones who are getting it very effectively. So, I wanted to learn from that. What is it they do? Obviously, sales professionals invest a lot into training. They're very thoughtful, I think, about, what type of conversation to have, what kind of value to bring and surface to the business partner, how to stay relevant. Yeah. And I think it's very much transferable and should be transferable to procurement profession, for sure.
I remember you asked me about it one day. We were actually, it was just later, and you had said, how did you get that discussion? And I talked to you about how I do it. And, look, we investigate so deeply. I said, let me say it this way, the good ones do. I think we have a long way to go. I know there's a lot of frustration with salespeople who just, sling stuff and spray and pray or whatever metaphor, but the good ones do their homework, deeply do their homework. And I think we were having a conversation about a client I would talk to, and I said, I was telling you what I'm talking to them about. Like, how do you know that? I said, well, listen to the earnings call. I read their 10K. And then I think the light bulb went on for you. I don't think at the time, that you were doing that kind of stuff for your own, in your own organization. And so I was like I would, so that was part of, I think, helping you think about, okay, now if I'm going to get a seat at the table, and we like to be salespeople, like if we're really effective, if we can get involved at the very, very beginning in the problem identification stage or opportunity identification stage very early, which, I think procurement does get sometimes typecast to be at the end of the process. And I know, Donna, you wanted to get in that, and I'd say, well, that's how we do it. And we bring ideas, and we do our homework, and we hypothesize. I think that's kind of, what you were picking up, and then I saw you doing it, and you were going to your business partners with a very different discussion.
Well, that brings me to the second point, actually, because sometimes inherently external perspective, gets more credibility, or like instant credibility, because like a procurement profession could do in the same research that Chris, you just outlined, but there's something about, a consultant walking in and, with a different degree of credibility. So the in-house almost doesn't get the same, opportunity, which taught me then to, if you can't beat them, join them. So go together. So that's where I kind of turned. I was like, okay, great. If they already have an in, as a business partner, let me build a relationship with supplier and then go together. So, and even better observe, the dynamic. I'd rather be in the room where it happens. Okay. To quote Hamilton here, but and if that's, possible by building the relationship with suppliers that have credibility with the business unit, then do that. So I'm always, as long as the right thing gets done, it doesn't matter who started it, so.
But I'll tell you, this does happen, where, we either will bring an idea to someone, and the idea travels without us, and ideas, you have to understand in a business that an idea can be gold, can be, it's your IP. But it does happen where you'll share an idea and then thank you for that, thank you for the free insight and free advice. So, I've, this is not to implicate procurement per se, but because it happens across the board. So I think that idea that if you bring, if for the procurement professionals who are listening and want that external insight and see the value in that, and you'd bring us with you, we go together to talk with the business. There's a high degree of trust. You'll get more. We'll feed. I think we could help you, broaden that perspective, and be that source of insight that you may not have had. So the approach you just mentioned, Dee, is really and I think builds a lot of trust, and would hope others would latch on to that.
Yeah. I agree. And I've seen the benefit of that, tremendously, actually, in terms of opening up doors. The thing is, we still have a say and a right to say no, so it's not a complete runaway train, but again, if you're in the conversation, they have more opportunity to influence. And if that's ultimately what we want, then get in the conversation.
Right.
And then the third thing that I would say, I learned, there's a concept of kind of equal level field, right? When we run a competitive bid, which again, our job is to bring the most competitive, product, service to the company, right? With all the right kind of risk mitigation attributes, et cetera. And I think that's important, right? So we do it in a way that's ethical, that's transparent, in terms of our approach. Which doesn't actually always happen, but in terms of transparency, but the ethical absolutely is a given. So, but the concept of level playing field gets a little misplayed. And what I mean by this, instead of, level the field, I would say level up. What I mean by this is we bring companies of different experience, different relationship, maybe stages with our businesses, with our stakeholders. And we throw them in and then say, okay, from this point on, once the RFP, starts ticking, nobody talks, basically, I mean, talk, but, we're very much in a controlled environment. And it's almost impossible for a new supplier, or supplier that hasn't had as much experience, with the business, to truly have a even playing field opportunity. They're behind. So I always think it's so important. And then, by the way, we get to the end of the RFP and say, you didn't get it because you actually didn't have that much experience. I'm like, well, that was a given, in the beginning. What's changed,
Right.
So
right.
I think so we knew that getting in, why put them through the ringer? So I would say really invest up front and actually level up suppliers, the ones that you don't know well, invest disproportionate time in getting to know them and make sure them, because ultimately, what's the goal? We want, as procurement professionals, the best outcome for the business, and the best will come from more information sharing, from more transparency, and that's kind of my pitch for the new concept of the level playing field.
And it's about so that we guess a lot less, if we're guessing, we're going to miss the mark. that's gonna, if I were in your shoes and I was selfishly thinking, what's in it for me, to let that play out, to give maybe an insurgent more time, with to build the relationship, to learn. It's that you're going to get a better output. You're going to get better ideas. You're going to get a more accurate solution, so to speak. And I've seen this, by the way. I have seen, and I've been part of situations where we knew an incumbent was just so strong, and we said, look, if you could give us, this amount of time with these stakeholders before you run the process, we're in. There is a statistic, and I'm going to botch it, but I want to say, and we did it when, we looked at, I came from business. We had pretty long-term, contracts. They're pretty integrated. And our renewal rates were really, really high, even when our clients are frustrated. And if you're running a process, that your suppliers know that. And so how can you help them, close the information gap, be more confident that they have a chance to win, the opportunity. And so your level up idea really fits nicely into that.
Yeah. Plus, I remember hearing you, like, I think one day just spending hours, I think, on a call with a big team trying to figure out an answer to such basic question. I was like, wait, didn't you get it? Like, as part of the setup, the brief. And you guys know, the client wouldn't do their shares, that it's all an RFP. So much guessing goes on. And I do think it's a good principle to take the guessing out of it.
It's not, Alicia, you want to jump in and answer the question? Sorry, but I'll just leave this last point there. This may or may not surprise you on the buy side, but at many companies, if you're not involved in influencing the RFP and even sharing, this is, and look, you have a lot of business buyers that are either new at buying. It may be their first sort of big deal. And they do look for their trusted consultants and supply side to give them ideas on how to structure something. And I'll tell you, there are lots of companies that say, if you didn't influence that RFP, don't respond. It's just the probability is, that, and it's not that it's not, that's a lot of feedback. Sudden.
Yep.
Yeah.
How's this? Is it still?
No,
Yeah,
good.
it's fine now. Mm-hmm.
We know that your intent is to get the right outcome, but I'll tell you that, if you don't have those kinds of ways to level up, you're probably going to miss an opportunity, because of the way our experience and what we've learned and what we've seen. So just a food for thought.
Great. No, thank you. And thanks for Donna for sharing what you feel like you've learned from sales. So just let me recap what we've heard. So be the gateway, not the gatekeeper. Go together, don't go alone, and don't level the playing field, level up. All right, so Chris, your turn. So Chris, your turn. I'm sure you've learned a lot from Donna. So can you talk a little bit about what you've learned from your wife in procurement?
Yeah.
Much longer list. No, I'm just kidding.
So one is about the importance and impact of risk and how much that plays into the equation. I mean, look, I am looking to the companies I help and the work I do. I am looking to make a match. I don't want to sell something someone doesn't want or need. It creates downstream problems, but it's about making the match and finding the fit. And we're so exuberant about our ideas and about what's possible. We don't necessarily think about the risk that it introduces to an organization. And I think in learning from Donna and seeing that part of the role is to mitigate these risks for the organization and protect the organization. And Donna worked for American Express, and there was no deal that was worth putting the enterprise at risk. Nothing's worth it. The brand is so strong. It's so proud. They've one of the oldest and proudest businesses out there. Pfizer the same way. I mean, you've worked for these great big brands. They're not risking it no matter how. So I learned to understand risk deeply. And I use it to think about how to position the work that we do. I think about the company risk of the idea. I think about the organizational risk, right, to that department. I think about the personal risk when the buyer's sitting across from me, or buyers, multiple buyers. What do they have to gain or lose? And I have to understand that risk. And sales, we miss it so often, and we just hit the gas. Isn't this great? Why don't you want to buy it? I've certainly learned that element of risk, and it's made me hugely effective in what I do.
And I think it's thinking ahead, so much, because I do see like that enthusiasm for the idea, but then not being on the receiving end of it, right? The buyers of procurement are thinking, wait, but have you thought of how much we have to like divert now in terms of attention or money, or, reprioritize things? That's a risk too. It's not just, your kind of traditional infosecurity or some other things, but it's the operational, personal, all of those considerations, that have to be given up front, or early enough in the process to make introducing change, right? So as exciting as it is, I think it did make you much more thoughtful about, how to make it happen.
And and if anyone on anyone listening is selling, when you understand risk and your customer sees that you recognize it, and you're ideally helping them mitigate it, you just develop such a higher degree of trust. The second thing, you're kind of like you're hitting on it, this sort of point on change. Look, the thing that stands, I sort of teach this, it is all about change, and the thing that stands between a salesperson and a deal is the customer's resistance or inability or unwillingness to change. And so what we do in sales is try to analyze that. And we've created a framework around this we call the case for change. And I've learned this because Donna would have such a broad perspective, and I'd bring an idea and describe why this is valuable, and I'd listen to her, and many she's done hundreds of deals and heard lots of pitches, and I think she'd get frustrated because there are absolutely times when there's no reason to change, that you shouldn't change. Sorry, that you just what we have is the right solution. It may not be the latest and greatest. It may miss some bells and whistles, but there's absolutely times when the status quo is the right answer. And I think that's a hard thing to understand for a salesperson, that is sometimes the case, and understanding all the intricacies, especially the larger enterprises, but it does certainly trickle down. So I think, Alicia, I've learned that sometimes there's not a good reason, so stop. And I'd say the last learning, and again, these are all really good learnings to help. And when I talk with sales teams, it isn't only about the business. And I thought for years, it's me aligning with the business and what the business needs and what they want. And if I just align with them and I can give them, I can tap into their, the challenges and feed their desires, and I have the right thing, well, that's it. I've got this deal. I learned the hard way many times that that's not the case. And especially in enterprise, when I talk about it, a company starts to play defense when they start to when they get closer to buying something. The attorneys show up, the contract professionals show up, the finance people are showing up, and and look, because those organizations are there to protect the company. So I've learned it's not all about the business. And I've learned really deeply about what an important role somebody in Donna's position in procurement can play in orchestrating this whole thing. So that's
just to clarify that point, is it's not just about that business unit or that specific idea. And I think the beauty of procurement is that we sit at an enterprise level, right? And that's our unique kind of differentiated value, that we absolutely keep an eye, kind of a bird's eye view on everything that's going on and have the enterprise in mind. While you might be helping, not that the business partners and business units are solely kind of focused on their silo, but naturally they have their business unit results come first, and other things like that drive more of a unintentional, but maybe focused, decision process. So, and procurement often even brings the business partners to the table. Like, hold on, have you thought about this more holistically? And because there's another business unit that's doing something, either similar or has already done this. So again, thinking, in that context of the enterprise, and procurement could be a great friend, actually, and a very effective one, to the sales teams and the business to think that up front.
And through we do a lot of studying about how we study so much. My firm and a lot of us in this side of the table, we do study a lot about how you buy things. And over the last year, the CFO and the procurement organization have been playing an even more demonstrative role in the process. So we've all learned this, and how to manage all these different pieces. But yeah, that's better fine point on it. It's about not just about the business unit, but the enterprise. And so
great
lessons that we've incorporated, and I teach and share. So
that's excellent. No, thank you, Chris. Thanks for sharing. It's always nice to hear the perspective of the groups that and the perceptions and the learnings that the groups get from us within procurement. So it was for the sales side, looking at procurement, you understand the impact of risk. There's a good reason to not change sometimes, and it's not only about the business. I think that's very, very helpful.
Am I going to get a chance to complain about procurement, or no? That's not this episode.
No. Lesson will help us grow and learn.
That was it. Yeah, I'm gonna pay that later.
Yeah. Okay. Feedback is a gift. So time flies when you're having fun, and I want to make sure I cover off on at least one more thing. So you've started something you're calling Same Side. So what is it, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
So you got a little bit of our dialogue and our perspective right now, right? Which really kind of was born out of a lot of dinner conversations, frankly, coming home, at the end of the day, and just trying to figure out one side would do something that made no sense, and the other way around. So as boring as it sounds, we've had a lot of those, perspective kind of sharing moments, and also realized just how much, time and energy, gets wasted when you don't have that perspective, right? So our concept is, if we could somehow codify, our thinking, that, under the same side, I guess kind of brand umbrella, but the idea is that you get on the same side, to solve a problem. So, and really, build, stronger trust, bring more transparency and understanding to some of the very complex transactions, that we do. So that's the idea behind it. And, we're thinking.
Started out as us at dinner, then we wrote about it. We have a blog called Move Same Side. We met up with a brilliant entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who's turning it into a platform, into a business. And just the whole idea is to get buyers and sellers working together in much more collaborative ways. So there's more to come on it, but that's really, it grew out of, what we just talked about here is just the benefits of collaboration, working together, seeing the other person's perspective.
No, that's great. No, that's excellent. That sounds exciting, and I've seen some of the content, and it's been fun to follow and learn as you go through the journey and move this message along. So I'm happy we were able to cover it briefly. I know we have a couple more questions that we could likely cover, but we're getting really close to time. And I haven't seen any questions pop up in the Q&A or in the chat. So I just wanted to give a quick shout that we'll be looking to wrap up the discussion soon. So if there are any burning questions, please feel free to use the chat boxes so that we can quickly address them before the end of the session. But I am enjoying the dialogue. I think we've talked a lot about the observations and learnings, which is really quickly while I buy time to allow people to have a moment to formulate or send over at least maybe one question that we can address before we wrap up here. We've talked about it a little bit, but just want to see if there's any further that you'd like to address, especially as it relates to same side. So anything that you've observed from either the buy or sell side that you'd like to talk about further.
And this is more of an indictment of us in the sales side. It's sort of some of the behaviors that get in our way of getting a deal. And I wouldn't be the first to say that we can be pushy. We know it. Sales has probably been going the wrong direction in terms of building its brand. You'll have to understand, and I hope people will hear this, is there are so many salespeople out there that want to do the right thing, in spite of some of the bad, press we get. I've been doing this since third grade. I was that kid knocking on your door, selling you candy or magazine subscriptions. So I love the profession, and it's always been about service to me. And I know there are lots and lots of people like me, but I definitely think, we've got to be careful about being pushy, and that's a behavior I see. And Donna, I like to say, so, you can't get a client to buy before they're ready to buy, but you can get them ready to buy. You can't get them to buy before they're ready, but you can get them ready to buy. That's and so that's part of our job, and that I've learned that from Donna as well. So that's something that just in the sales profession, learning to understand how to help people. And my firm, we talk about something called buyer first selling, which is about giving buyers what they want and help. We know now it's a lot more self-service. You want to do more on your own. So how can we create less friction and offer that up? So these are the kinds of things that we're thinking about.
I think it's important because, sorry, just triggered a thought, about kind of the pushiness and the timing. We used to joke that, some of the quarterly quotas, that drive certain behaviors, and really not helpful, but I guess, we call like the Christmas special, when the year end needs to close up for especially software, companies. Now we also took advantage of that too in procurement, knowing that that's when the quarter ends and somebody's motivated, but it doesn't have to be like this. And I know, Chris, you and other companies are kind of collaborating a whole other selling kind of incentive model that doesn't actually include even commissions and things. Because again, doing it more, for like, don't make it your problem, my problem, in terms of your timing and when the quotas have to be met, I think is an important task, just, one along the concept of the buyer kind of centric journey. So.
Great. And now, Chris, you've shared some feedback on the sales side. So Donna, is there anything else you want to add from the procurement side that maybe we need to do better?
I am very passionate about this profession, and I've seen some amazing, again, leaders and people in this space, and so proud, of where Chain IQ is driving the profession, and really leveling up, our expertise and service that we deliver to clients. I would say, as Chris said, there are some behaviors sometimes that, sales professionals exhibit, that are maybe pushy or too exuberant, and I think for procurement, sometimes maybe we're more process driven kind of versus the purpose, right? And so it's really important to continue the learning, being the catalyst, for change. The world is changing dynamically, so figuring out a way how to stay really relevant and in this ever-changing world is so important. But I'm probably preaching to the choir, because whoever is tuning into this webinar is clearly has a growth mindset and focused on learning. But I would say I love that enthusiasm, that sales profession does bring. Kind of what if, let's see what's possible, and I would adapt that to procurement as well.
I do talk to a lot of different organizations about this. And years ago, Donna, I've been married for 13 years, 14 years. Sorry, hon.
That's the question. Okay.
But talk about, engaging procurement. Then I'm sorry, you wouldn't get many salespeople who would even bite on that idea. What I'm seeing now, and it's just I think an evolution of where you guys have taken the profession. I'm seeing a lot more salespeople going, why didn't I think of that? That's a brilliant idea, and they're getting a lot of value. So for those who are embracing salespeople are people too, and those of you who are embracing them on the procurement side, I'm telling you, it's working, and hopefully you're getting value from it as well.
No, that's great. Now, look, we did get one question in, so I do want to see if we can quickly address that before we wrap up here. It was mentioned by Mohammed, so thank you for the question. He would like to ask from the wonderful panel how challenging it is to have work-life balance as a couple working in a competitive enterprise world.
I'm going to go first, Dee. But because we were sitting there last night, she has she's working for a Swiss company, so she's got to get up at 5 today. We're preparing for a number of different. It's stressful, but I would call it, Mohammed, strive for work-life integration, and that's not my word. A friend of mine, Alicia, Donna from SEI, who I read something he wrote, and I thought, that's it. It's about integration. I mean, especially now, I'm sure everyone's experiencing this. Whether you're in business together or not, it is like everything's meshed. And I'd say that's been successful for us, just integrating it all. Yeah.
It's easier said than done, though, just to, and I don't have a recipe for success necessarily. I think we're evolving it every day, but I know, for example, I need certain chunk of time of Chris undivided attention, meaning no phone, nothing. So we could, plan. I also know my triggers, that will stress me out, or things that kind of pile on that, okay, if I could upfront, deal with them or plan better, that's helpful for me. And everyone's different, not easy, but definitely communication, shared calendar is a must, I would say. Okay. And just sometimes things okay, life happens, all right, so the dogs are going to bark. What are you going to do? If somebody did not put them away for this conference call, but, have a little levity as well is helpful, and communicate.
Excellent. I know we are just wrapping up at time, so I saw one more question come through. So what I can do is do the wrap up, and then maybe ask that you address the question as we end here. So first and foremost, because I don't want to make sure we acknowledge everyone before we lose everyone at the end of our time period. But thank you so much, everyone on the webinar, for your time and engagement in the session today. I personally really found this to be a valuable session and provided some, helpful perspective on procurement and sales and what we can learn from each other. And Donna and Chris, thank you very much for your time and preparation, and for sharing a lot of your personal experiences that's going to allow us to grow, and also sharing some vulnerable experiences and moments that allow you to become the professionals that you are today, and also how you operate as a family, which are some of the challenges that you have addressed. So just as we wrap up here in the last couple of minutes, I'm sure we all would appreciate any final words or advice that you have for the audience, and if possible, the question that came in was, what was the top learning that you've achieved from the other side? So I know each of you mentioned some of the learnings, but if you can just mention that top learning as you give some of your final words today, that would be helpful.
I'll go first, Dee, but it's simple. It's an everyday learning, and I work on it. Is you learn more by listening than talking. And I know that's a common phrase, but and back to this whole thing is just what we teach a lot right now in sales is actually how to listen. And so I'm a work in progress, but that's my best learning. And I learned so much from Donna and from the other side, and that's my my number one thing for anyone to build successful partnerships.
Wow, he kind of stole mine, but I think it's such an important one. So the curiosity. So I think that's what I learned from, Chris, from you and from sales. It's always asking, kind of getting to the root of, but why something is a problem? Why would somebody benefit from something? How would that show up? And really deeply examining something to see if you can bring the benefit, and that's where I, again, think procurement, has such an opportunity for an impact, is to bring an insight and a better outcome for the company. So, but it starts with the why.
Got it. Very nice. Any final words? It's been so helpful and powerful.
Thank you. That's my final words. So as you're juggling your life and 2 young babies and a demanding career. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure. And like you said, we had a lot of good times back in our Pfizer days. So it's been great to connect today on this.
Good.
Very excellent. Well, thank you, Chris, as well. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Kathy, again, for having us. And thanks for all the participants on sticking here with us. And I hope you found it as valuable and enjoying as we did. So thank you.
Alicia.
All right. Goodbye.